Every year, tornadoes and other extreme windstorms injure and kill people and damage millions of dollars worth of property in the United States. Even so, people build houses in tornado-prone areas each year, possibly putting themselves into the path of such storms. Having a shelter or a safe room built into your house can help you protect yourself and your family from injury or death caused by the dangerous forces of extreme winds. It can also relieve some of the anxiety created by the threat of an oncoming severe storm. Should you consider building a shelter in your house to protect yourself and your family during a tornado? The answer depends on your answers to many questions. Do you live in a high-risk area? How quickly can you reach safe shelter during extreme winds? What level of safety do you want to provide? What is the cost of a shelter? This video will help you answer these and other questions so you can decide how best to protect yourself and your family. It includes the results of research that has been underway for more than 20 years by Texas Tech University's Wind Research Engineering Center and other wind engineering research facilities on the effects of extreme winds on buildings. This booklet also provides shelter designs that will show you and your builder contractor how to construct a shelter underneath a new house, in the basement of a new house, or in an interior room of a new house, or how to modify an existing house to add a shelter in one of these areas. These shelters are designed to protect you and your family from the high winds expected during tornadoes and from flying debris such as wood studs that tornadoes usually create. The National Association of Home Builders Research Center has evaluated these designs for construction methods, materials, and costs. Engineers at Texas Tech University have confirmed the design requirements for the expected forces from wind pressure and the impact of typical flying debris. The shelters are designed with life safety as the primary consideration. Almost every state in the United States has been affected by extreme windstorms such as tornadoes and hurricanes. Virtually every state has been affected by a considerable tornado. Many areas of the United States, including coastal areas of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands and coastal areas of Hawaii, have been affected by hurricanes. Even in states not normally considered to be susceptible to extreme windstorms, there are areas that experience dangerous high winds. These areas typically are near mountain ranges and include the Pacific Northwest coast. Not all parts of each state are at equal risk from tornadoes. For example, while Texas has the highest number of recorded tornadoes, the state's least tornado-prone area along the Gulf Coast has been hit by fewer tornadoes than northeastern Arkansas. Comparing the numbers of tornadoes recorded in different areas within a state can give you a better understanding of the potential tornado activity in those areas. This map shows the number of tornadoes recorded per 1,000 square miles in the United States and its possessions and territories. To understand what happens when extreme winds strike, you must first understand that tornado and hurricane winds are not constant. Wind speeds, even in these extreme wind events, rapidly increase and decrease. An obstruction, such as a house, in the path of the wind, causes the wind to change direction. This change in wind direction increases pressure on parts of the house. The combination of increased pressures and fluctuating wind speeds creates stress on the house that frequently cause connections between building components to fail. For example, the roof or siding can be pulled off, or the windows can be pushed in. Buildings that fail under the effects of extreme winds often appear to have exploded, giving rise to the misconception that the damage is caused by unequal wind pressures inside and outside the building. This misconception has led to the myth that during an extreme wind event, the windows and doors in a building should be opened to equalize the pressure. In fact, opening a window or door allows wind to enter a building and increases the risk of building failure. Damage can also be caused by flying debris, referred to as wind-borne missiles. If wind speeds are high enough, missiles can be thrown at a building with enough force to penetrate windows, walls, or the roof. For example, an object such as a 2x4 wood stud weighing 15 pounds, when carried by a 250 mile per hour wind, can have a horizontal speed of 100 miles an hour and enough force to penetrate most common building materials used in houses today. Even a reinforced masonry wall will be penetrated unless it has been designed and constructed to resist debris impact during extreme winds. Because missiles can severely damage and even penetrate walls and roofs, they threaten not only buildings, but the occupants as well. The purpose of a shelter is to provide a space where you and your family can survive a tornado or hurricane with little or no injury. In hurricane-prone areas, the shelter cannot be built where it can be flooded during a hurricane. Your shelter should be readily accessible from all parts of your house, and it should be free of clutter. To protect the occupants during extreme windstorms, the shelter must be adequately anchored to the house foundation to resist overturning and uplift. The connections between all parts of the shelter must be strong enough to resist failure, and the walls, roof, and door must resist penetration by wind-borne missiles. Extensive testing by Texas Tech University and other wind engineering research facilities has shown that walls, ceilings, and doors commonly used in house construction cannot withstand the impact of missiles carried by extreme winds. The shelter designs in the booklet account for these findings by specifying building materials and combinations of building materials that will resist penetration by wind-driven missiles in extreme winds. The shelter designs, including both materials and connections, are based on wind speeds that are rarely exceeded in the United States. Therefore, a shelter built according to these designs is expected to withstand the forces imposed on it by extreme winds without failing. Those forces may cause cracks or other signs of stress in the materials or connections used in the shelter, and they may cause materials or connections to yield. However, the intent of the designs is not to produce a shelter that will always remain completely undamaged, but rather a shelter that will enable its occupants to survive an extreme windstorm with little or no injury. It's very important to note that predicting the exact strength of tornadoes and hurricanes is impossible. That is why another reason why the shelter designs in this booklet are based on extreme wind speeds, and why the primary consideration is life safety. Designing a building to resist damage from more than one natural hazard requires different, sometimes competing approaches. For example, building a structure on an elevated foundation to raise it above expected flood levels can increase its vulnerability to wind and seismic damage. These design approaches need to be thoroughly considered. In flood-prone areas, careful attention should be given to the warning time, velocity, depth, and duration of flood waters. These flooding characteristics can have a significant bearing on the design and possibly even the viability of a shelter. The amount of floor area per person that your shelter must provide depends partly on the type of windstorm the shelter is intended to protect you from. Tornadoes are not long-lasting storms, so if you are relying on your shelter only for tornado protection, you will not need to stay in the shelter for a long time. As a result, comfort is of not great concern, and a shelter that provides about 5 square feet of floor area per person will be big enough. In a new or existing house with a basement, the shelter should be built in the basement. You can build the shelter as an entirely separate structure with its own walls, or you can use one or more of the basement walls as walls of the shelter. If you use the basement walls, they will have to be specially reinforced. Typical reinforcement techniques used in residential basement walls will not provide sufficient protection from missiles. In new construction, your builder contractor can reinforce the walls near the shelter during the construction of your house. Reinforcing the basement walls of an existing house is not practical. The likelihood of missiles entering the basement is lower than for above-ground areas. However, there is a significant chance that missiles or falling debris will enter the basement through an opening left when a window, a door, or the first floor above has been torn off by extreme wind. Therefore, your basement shelter must have its own reinforced ceiling. The basement ceiling, or the first floor above, cannot be used as the ceiling of the shelter. Another alternative shelter location is an interior room on the first floor of the house. Researchers, emergency response personnel, and people cleaning up after a tornado have often found an interior room of a house still standing when all other above-ground parts of the house have been destroyed. Closets, bathrooms, and small storage rooms offer the advantage of having a function other than providing occasional storm protection. Typically, these rooms have only one door and no windows, which makes them well suited for conversion to a shelter. Bathrooms have the added advantage of including a water supply and toilet. Regardless of where you build your shelter, the walls and ceiling of the shelter must be built so they will protect you from missiles and falling debris, and so that they will remain standing if your house is severely damaged by extreme winds. If sections of your house walls are used as shelter walls, those sections must be separated from the structure of the house. This is true regardless of whether you use interior or exterior walls of the house. The shelter which we have chosen as our example will be suitable for either a basement or ground level location. You will notice that the general framing for the walls consists of doubled 2x4s which are installed on 12-inch centers. This is more closely spaced than the conventional 16-inch centers and single 2x4s of most construction, or the 24-inch centers now allowed in newer construction. For added protection from wind-driven missiles and extra rigidity, 14-gauge steel panels are installed around the sidewalls and will be included as a roof panel. The materials your builder contractor will need to build your shelter should be available from building material suppliers in your community. These materials have been carefully selected for their strength, durability, and/or ability to be readily combined in ways that will enable them to withstand the forces of extreme winds and the impact of wind-borne missiles. Your builder contractor should not substitute any other material for those specified in the designs. One of the most vulnerable parts of your shelter is the door. The materials specified for doors in the shelter designs in the booklet were tested by the Wind Engineering Research Center at Texas Tech University for their ability to carry wind loads and prevent penetration by missiles. The installation of the door is as important as the materials used in its construction. Please confirm with your builder contractor that the door to your shelter can be installed the way it is shown in the designs included with the booklet. A complete list of the shelter construction materials with their